It's 2 in the morning, somewhere west of Guam, and I'm standing watch on a ship that isn't supposed to be at sea. COVID just hit. Every other branch of the military in the world has pulled back into quarantine. But we didn't. My son had just been born, and I was 6 weeks from even being allowed to go home. Sweating through a uniform in a space with no air conditioning because the cooling system was tagged out, and there was no escaping the heat. In a locker on the ship, I had a phone full of pictures I wasn't in. A video of my son sneezing for the first time, a week old, and I'd watched maybe 40 times. At 2 in the morning, with nothing happening and nothing to read and nothing left to study, the silence asked me a question I did not have an answer for. The actual words in my head were, what am I doing with my life? Here's the part that nobody tells you about that question. It's not the scary part that you don't have an answer. The scary part is when you realize you've never once been asked the question. Clean your room, do your homework, get the grades, go to college, get the job. Every decision up to that point has been someone else's, and you'd executed them all. And you've never once stopped to ask whether any of it was actually yours. This isn't a Navy story. That's not a deployment story. If you're watching this and you make good money and your title is good and your house is good, and somewhere underneath all of that, there's this flatness you can't explain to anyone because on paper, you have nothing to complain about. You already know the question I'm talking about. You've just been too disciplined to say it out loud. And here's where this gets interesting, because most people think the fix is more information. You feel stuck, so you read another book. You feel behind, so you take a course. You feel scattered, so you download another system. I want to be precise about something because precision is the whole job here. Information and transformation are not the same thing. And the gap between them is where most high performers spend the back half of their lives. You can know exactly what you should be doing and still not do it. You can understand your patterns intellectually and still repeat them at 11 o'clock tonight. If knowing were the bottleneck, the most well-read people on earth would also be the most fulfilled. And you and I both know plenty of people with shelves full of books and a life that simply doesn't fit. So if it's not a knowledge problem, what is it? This is the turn. And I want you to actually sit with it instead of nodding past it. You are a system, not a metaphor, an actual operating structure, built the same way every complex system gets, built piece by piece, instruction by instruction, starting before you had any say in the matter. When you were 5 years old, you knew exactly what you wanted. My son told me without a flicker of hesitation that he wants to be a race car. Doesn't want to drive one, he wants to be one. That's not a cute kid thing. That's a fully coherent person speaking before the overwrite began. Then the corrections start. Not abuse, not trauma, just the ordinary thousand small instructions every kid absorbs. Be realistic, be practical. That's not how you make money. Act your age. And each one bends the trajectory by a degree you'd never notice in the moment. 30 years later, you're a long way from where that 5-year-old was pointed. And you've forgotten that there was ever a different heading because the drift was too slow to feel. That's the mechanism. Not a motivation problem, a mapping problem. You were never lost. Your ability to see the map was overridden, line by line. Every system you were ever run through. By every system you were ever run through. The Navy gave me one version of that system. Discipline, structure, an answer for everything, and a chain of command that made every decision for me so cleanly I didn't notice I'd stopped making my own. I got out, and I thought I'd broken free of it. And instead, I walked straight into a second version with better stock options. A different building, same architecture. You hit the targets, you get the promotion, you feel for about a week like you've arrived. And then it's quiet again. And the question from the Pacific is still standing there, except now you're 34 and the stakes are higher and you've got less excuse to still be asking it. I want to give you the proof because I don't want this to be a feeling. I want it to be something you can verify against your own life. I do this work professionally now. I take someone's actual history, their actual decisions, their actual patterns, not a personality quiz. I trace it the way you trace a fault in a system that's throwing errors. Not guessing, tracing. A therapist who'd worked with one of my clients for 20 years read through 3 pages of what I built and asked me how I'd gotten there so fast. The answer is that therapy and coaching, for the most part, are working on a system without ever mapping the system first. You can install new behavior on top of an unmapped structure and it'll hold for a while, and then the structure underneath reasserts itself because nobody traced where the original instructions came from. In the Navy, when a nuclear system threw an anomaly, we never guessed. We traced it back to the root cause every single time because guessing on a system like that gets people killed. Nobody has ever traced you. This is not your failure. That's just a step nobody offered you. Here's what changes the moment you actually see the map instead of just feeling its absence. You stop fighting yourself. You stop white-knuckling discipline to override a pattern that's going to keep reasserting itself until it's actually named. You stop reading the book, hoping that this is the one that finally sticks. When the real issue was never information density, it was that you've been trying to apply new instructions on top of an operating system you've never once looked at directly. The fog doesn't lift because you tried harder. It lifts because you finally saw the thing clearly enough to stop arguing with it. And now I'll tell you honestly, I built this because I needed it for myself first. Notebook in the Pacific, a ride in the rain, waterproof, because everything else on that ship was wet. I filled it with every idea I had for getting out, and most of them were bad. But the act of tracing my own thinking on paper was the first time I'd ever actually looked at the machine instead of just living inside of it. It took me longer than it should have to act on what I found. There's always a counteroffer, a promotion, easier orders, a comfortable path that lets you avoid the work. Almost everyone I talked to told me to stay. The ones that told me to go were the ones who'd already done it themselves. And that's worth remembering. Don't take direction from anyone who hasn't been where you're trying to go. So here's what I'll leave you. And I'm not going to dress this up as a soft next step, because it isn't one. If what I just described is familiar, if you've got the title, the house, the numbers that should add up to satisfaction, and somehow don't, the next move isn't another book. It isn't more effort thrown at a system you've never fully mapped. You've never actually mapped. It's the deep system decode. I take your actual history and trace it the way I trace systems in the Navy. Root cause, not system management. Not to fix you, because you were never broken, but to finally show you the structure that you've been running on without ever choosing it. The application is below. I read everyone personally. If it's not the right time, you'll know that too. But you already know the question. You've known it for a while. The only thing left is whether you finally trace it or whether you go back to sleep on watch one more time.